Welcome to Indonesia Political Focus, your monthly audio briefing that distills the key political developments and analyses from across Indonesia. I'm your host, bringing you, of course, the essential insights from July 2025's most significant political events. This month's focus: Indonesia's remarkable transformation on the global stage. President Prabowo Subianto's administration achieved unprecedented diplomatic breakthroughs that fundamentally repositioned Indonesia's international standing. We're talking about Indonesia's historic first full participation in the BRICS summit as the 11th member nation, and a groundbreaking trade agreement with the European Union that promises zero tariffs for up to 80% of Indonesian exports. But here's the thing, and it's a crucial insight: these international victories carry profound domestic political implications. They're reshaping economic policy, influencing coalition dynamics, and creating new avenues for political capital. In this episode, we'll explore how Indonesia's international positioning intersects with domestic politics. We'll examine the economic diplomacy strategy behind these achievements. And we'll assess how global partnerships are, in fact, being leveraged for domestic political objectives. So, let's dive into Indonesia's emerging role as a global South leader. July 2025's political atmosphere was undeniably defined by diplomatic assertiveness with strategic purpose. This wasn't just about international relations. These developments fundamentally altered Indonesia's domestic political landscape and its economic policy framework. The key theme, it seems, became Indonesia's calculated pivot toward alternative global partnerships, all while maintaining strategic flexibility. The administration truly demonstrated how international positioning can serve domestic political objectives and economic development goals simultaneously. These events, they connect to broader trends in Indonesian foreign policy, particularly the quest for greater autonomy in global affairs and the utilization of international partnerships to advance domestic development priorities. President Prabowo's administration is clearly leveraging Indonesia's strategic geography and economic potential to maximize diplomatic leverage. What analysts found particularly significant this month was the timing and coordination of these diplomatic initiatives. The BRICS summit participation wasn't isolated, as we observe. It was part of a comprehensive strategy that included the EU breakthrough, bilateral engagements with Saudi Arabia and Belarus, and strengthened ASEAN cooperation through the Malaysia consultation. The administration's approach, you see, revealed a sophisticated understanding of global power dynamics. By positioning Indonesia as a bridge between regions and ideological blocs, Prabowo's team created multiple diplomatic options, very carefully avoiding the constraints of exclusive partnerships. Perhaps most telling was how these international achievements were immediately translated into domestic political narratives. The EU trade agreement, for instance, became clear evidence of economic diplomacy's effectiveness. And BRICS membership? Well, that powerfully demonstrated Indonesia's rising global influence. These weren't just foreign policy wins, they were absolutely critical domestic political assets. The month showcased Indonesia's emergence as what we might call a strategic non-aligned power, one that leverages multiple partnerships to advance national interests without sacrificing autonomy. This truly represents a significant evolution in Indonesian foreign policy, thinking, and execution. Looking at the presidency, President Prabowo's extraordinary diplomatic engagement throughout July demonstrated both his personal diplomatic style and a clear strategic vision for Indonesia's global positioning. His intensive international tour showcased Indonesia's ambition, particularly his advocacy for a South-South economic compact at the BRICS summit and comprehensive UN reforms. This signals Indonesia's intention to lead global South cooperation from within newly influential multilateral frameworks. The BRICS participation, in particular, was truly significant. Indonesia's membership in the expanded bloc means the organization now represents 40% of global GDP and 56% of the world's population. It's positioning itself, quite assertively, as a formidable alternative to Western-dominated institutions. President Prabowo's championing of greater representation for developing nations at the UN, for example, demonstrates how Indonesia is leveraging its new BRICS platform for broader diplomatic objectives. In the legislative and executive branches, the administration continues operating through its unprecedented, large tent coalition. It comprises 48 ministers and 58 vice ministers, the largest cabinet in decades. This broad-based political consolidation strategy has effectively minimized opposition, while simultaneously creating internal competition for budgetary resources and policy direction. Policy developments show significant momentum in social program implementation. The Free Nutritious Meals program faces an ambitious acceleration from 6.7 million to 20 million beneficiaries before August 17th Independence Day. What does this mean on the ground, really? This represents both the administration's commitment to rapid implementation of campaign promises and, perhaps more critically, a vital test of logistics coordination across the archipelago. Conversely, the fiscal discipline initiative faced significant challenges, didn't it? Budget cuts of 306 trillion rupiah affected education, healthcare by 18.5%, and infrastructure by a staggering 73%. Yet, the administration maintained a deficit projection of 2.53% of GDP, comfortably within legal limits. But we must acknowledge, these austerity measures undeniably fed into the economic slowdown and raised serious concerns about balanced development priorities. A notable new initiative was the Presidential Fellowship Program launched July 27th. Prabowo convened 82 young professionals to discuss strategic priorities, including pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and energy independence. This signals the administration's effort to tap younger expertise while very clearly maintaining centralized control over key policy directions. The Village Economic Empowerment Initiative through 81,000 Mera Puti cooperatives represents a significant decentralization of social support systems. These cooperatives are designed to qualify for government credit financing. They could potentially provide a model for grassroots development, though their effectiveness will depend heavily on implementation quality and sustained support systems. What we're witnessing here is a comprehensive approach to governance, one that truly combines international ambition with domestic social transformation. The question remains, can this ambitious agenda be sustained? Analyzing the intricate web of power, the most significant and, frankly, controversial shift in Indonesia's power dynamics continues to be the expansion of military roles in civilian affairs. Within the Indonesian National Armed Forces, observers noted the formalization of new pharmaceutical responsibilities. Military laboratories are now authorized to produce and distribute medicines to villages at half price, starting October 2025. This expansion follows the passage of the revised Indonesian National Armed Forces Law in March 2025. It increased military involvement in civilian agencies from 10 to 14 positions. While government officials argue this doesn't constitute a return to Dwifungsi ABRI, the dual-function doctrine of the Suharto era, public concern, remains significant indeed. This truly represents a fundamental challenge to civil-military relations. Opposition strategies show interesting dynamics this month. The Dark Indonesia movement continued organizing protests against military expansion, building on earlier student protests outside parliament. Behind the headlines, these demonstrations reflect broader concerns about democratic backsliding. Even as overall public satisfaction with Prabowo's leadership remained remarkably high at 80.9% in July. The administration's large tent coalition strategy has, of course, created unique dynamics within the political establishment. With such broad representation across the political spectrum, traditional opposition mechanisms have been weakened. But quite tellingly, internal competition for resources and policy direction has intensified. This has effectively minimized external opposition while creating internal tensions that require careful management. Significant institutional developments also demand our attention. The Constitutional Court remained particularly active in July, delivering several rulings that strengthen democratic institutions. Most notably, In case number 104 PUU 23/2025, the court mandated that recommendation be interpreted as decision in election violation cases. This significantly strengthened the legal force of findings related to election violations. The court also prohibited leaders of advocate organizations from simultaneously holding positions as political party leaders or state officials. This demonstrates continued institutional independence despite broader concerns about democratic backsliding. These rulings suggest that while executive power has expanded, judicial oversight mechanisms remain robust. Elite networks around President Prabowo have consolidated significantly. The military's expanded role creates new channels of influence that bypass traditional civilian bureaucratic structures. The appointment of young professionals through the Presidential Fellowship Program indicates efforts to refresh expertise while maintaining centralized control over strategic policy directions. This civil-military tension emerges as perhaps the most critical power dynamic to monitor. It touches on fundamental questions about Indonesian democracy's future trajectory under Prabowo's leadership. As we analyze these power shifts, we must ask ourselves, are we witnessing pragmatic governance innovation or the gradual erosion of democratic norms? How is the public responding to these significant political developments? Well, there's a compelling contradiction in public sentiment. Despite widespread concern about military expansion, with a Compass Litbang survey finding 69.5% of respondents worried about increased military involvement in civilian affairs, overall public satisfaction with Prabowo's leadership remained remarkably high at 80.9% in July. This, interestingly, was driven primarily by support for people-centered policies like the Free Meals Program. In terms of civil action, the Dark Indonesia movement drew attention to military expansion concerns, continuing to organize protests throughout July. These demonstrations represent the most visible form of opposition to current governmental trends. They're building momentum from earlier student protests and reflecting broader democratic concerns among civil society organizations. The month also witnessed the Aksi Ajal 217 by online motorcycle taxi drivers on July 21st near the presidential palace. This protest illuminated ongoing challenges in the gig economy and the need for comprehensive labor rights reform for informal workers. These are issues that extend beyond traditional political concerns into economic justice, wouldn't you say? So what's the mood on the street regarding these changes? There's a complex dynamic where citizens appreciate tangible social benefits like the nutrition program and village cooperatives. Simultaneously, they're expressing concern about institutional changes that could affect democratic governance. The framing of these political events in the national media largely centered on the tension between governance effectiveness and democratic norms. Media discourse has focused particularly on whether military involvement represents pragmatic capacity utilization or concerning institutional drift. This duality in public sentiment, appreciation for policy, outcomes coupled with institutional concerns, represents one of the most significant political dynamics for understanding the current moment in Indonesian politics. What we're seeing is a society grappling with the trade-offs between effective governance and democratic principles. On the international stage, Indonesia's diplomatic positioning this month represented a masterclass in strategic non-alignment, with clear domestic political calculations. President Prabowo's participation in the 17th BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro from July 6-7 wasn't just ceremonial. It powerfully positioned Indonesia within an economic bloc representing 40% of global GDP and 56% of the world's population. This signals Jakarta's approach to creating alternative economic partnerships that reduce dependence on traditional Western-dominated institutions, with potential domestic political implications, including enhanced credibility for the administration's sovereignty-focused governance approach. The political maneuvering around BRICS membership, it reveals fascinating dynamics. By advocating for a South-South economic compact and comprehensive UN reforms, President Prabowo positioned himself as a global South leader while building domestic political capital around Indonesia's rising international influence. This serves broader political objectives, particularly reinforcing narratives about strong national leadership under his administration. While economics isn't our primary focus today, the political analysis of economic developments reveals how international agreements profoundly influence domestic political landscapes. The government's breakthrough with the European Union on July 13th demonstrates how economic diplomacy serves clear political purposes. The IUCEPA agreement, promising zero tariffs for up to 80% of Indonesian exports within 2 years, provides the administration with concrete deliverables to showcase diplomatic effectiveness, particularly benefiting labor-intensive industries, palm oil, fisheries, renewable energy, and electric vehicles that represent significant political constituencies. In terms of political maneuvering around technology policy, the administration's bilateral engagement with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to strengthen ties in digital economy and investment reveals how international partnerships serve broader political objectives. These agreements provide the administration with resources and partnerships that can be leveraged for domestic development initiatives, particularly President Prabowo's agenda of technological advancement and energy security that appeals to younger, urban constituencies. The intersection of fiscal decisions and international economic cooperation shows the Belarus engagement focusing on potash resources in exchange for Indonesian rubber and other commodities as a tool for economic diversification, while building political narratives around South-South cooperation and reduced Western dependence. How do these global economic connections translate into domestic political capital? Well, they provide the administration with compelling evidence of effective leadership, strategic thinking, and successful delivery of national interests, all crucial elements for maintaining public support and coalition cohesion. Looking beyond the capital, significant developments in infrastructure and regional development truly reflect national policy priorities in action. The development of the Nusantara capital city remained a high priority, as we know. President Prabowo instructed Minister Basuki to expedite the project, targeting completion within 3 years, despite ongoing calls for a moratorium from Partai Nasdem. As of July 2024, substantial progress was evident with 27,000 construction workers involved in the project. However, the symbolic decision to hold the 80th Indonesian Independence Day celebration in Jakarta, rather than IKN in 2025, suggested a pragmatic acknowledgement of current development limitations. It also highlighted the complex logistical challenges facing this massive undertaking. This national infrastructure push also had distinct regional reverberations. The month saw the inauguration of 37 electricity projects under President Prabowo's leadership, prioritizing energy security as part of the administration's food and energy security strategy. Infrastructure spending plans for 2025, including the IKN project, allocated Rp 400, $3 trillion. Though, of course, budget cuts raised concerns about balanced development across sectors. The Village Cooperative Initiative represents perhaps the most significant regional development. Over 81,000 Merah-Putih cooperatives established across Indonesia's diverse archipelago. This decentralized approach to economic empowerment could potentially transform local economic dynamics. Success, naturally, will depend heavily on implementation quality and the capacity of local institutions to effectively manage these new economic vehicles. Here's what's remarkable. We're witnessing a simultaneous top-down infrastructure push and a bottom-up economic empowerment strategy. Based on upcoming developments detailed in our analysis, next month we'll see the crucial finalization of the EU-Indonesia SEPA agreement in September 2025. This represents more than a trade deal. It's a true test of the administration's ability to translate diplomatic achievements into tangible economic benefits that citizens can experience directly. Success here could significantly boost public confidence in Prabowo's international economic strategy. Analysts, they're flagging Indonesia's evolving BRICS role as a critical issue to monitor. As the first Southeast Asian member, Indonesia's ability to bridge regional interests with broader global South cooperation could establish new models for middle power diplomacy. This positioning has clear domestic political value, reinforcing narratives about Indonesia's growing international importance under current leadership. A potential inflection point could be how global trade tensions, particularly ongoing U.S. tariff policies, create additional opportunities for alternative partnerships. The administration's success in exploiting these tensions for the EU breakthrough suggests a sophisticated understanding of global economic diplomacy that could yield further dividends. Indonesia's enhanced international positioning through multiple partnership tracks requires sustained diplomatic engagement and very careful balance. The challenge lies in maintaining strategic autonomy while maximizing benefits from diverse partnerships. This balancing act will certainly test the administration's diplomatic capabilities and could significantly impact domestic political standing. So, what should you really keep an eye on? The concrete implementation of international agreements and their translation into domestic economic benefits. The administration's credibility increasingly depends on demonstrating that diplomatic achievements produce measurable improvements for Indonesian businesses and citizens. To recap the main takeaways from this month's international positioning analysis. First, President Prabowo achieved remarkable diplomatic breakthroughs by positioning Indonesia as a strategic bridge between global power blocs, maximizing diplomatic options while advancing domestic political objectives. Second, the administration demonstrated sophisticated economic diplomacy, from BRICS membership to EU trade agreements. That creates concrete deliverables for domestic constituencies while enhancing international influence. And finally, these international achievements serve as crucial political capital, providing compelling evidence of effective leadership and strategic thinking that strengthens the administration's domestic legitimacy. These developments reveal Indonesia's emergence as a significant middle power capable of leveraging strategic partnerships for national advancement. The intersection of international positioning and domestic politics truly shows how effective diplomacy can reinforce domestic governance legitimacy. Indonesia's diplomatic evolution under President Prabowo presents fascinating insights into how emerging powers can maximize strategic autonomy while building beneficial partnerships in an increasingly multipolar world. Thank you for joining Indonesia Political Focus. I'll return next month to track how these international developments continue shaping Indonesia's political landscape.